Hello there, welcome to lesson number 1 in our series on creating pendants using FluidDesigner for 3D printing. In today's lesson we're going to show you how you can use a number of NURBS circles which have been joined together and put together and built for you in FluidDesigner as objects that you can just drag and drop onto the workspace. So if you start off FluidDesigner, we're going to do the learning projects, and it's learning projects, jewellery projects, pendants, and we're doing lesson number 01. So it's the 01 happy face pendant. You just can drag and drop that onto the workspace. Now I'm just going to switch on the screencast key, so any key presses I make should be displayed down here. And just to remind you that the instructions are all in the help panel on the left hand side here. If you don't want to watch the video. And this is the object that we're going to try and recreate. It's this kind of happy face pendant, and so there's a hole at the top here for a chain to go through. And this object is built from this one, and each of these circles here and the circle on the outside is in fact an object called a NURBS Circle. So if you go to Add Curve and NURBS Circle, it will create one of these objects. Now what we've done is we've put 5 onto the workspace here, and we've joined them all together so they act as one object. Okay, and if we just click on Group Library here, you'll notice if you go to the menu system, there are some templates of pendants which you can drag and drop onto the workspace and modify to suit your needs. So there's some different shape pendants there, but this particular item you'll find under NURBS Circles. So 3D templates, NURBS Circles. So these are pre-built objects for you where you've got 1 NURBS circle, 2, 3, 4 and 5, so you can just drag and drop these onto the workspace. And once you've learned how to manipulate these in today's lesson, you can make up a pendant or any other kind of object that your imagination allows you to out of these NURBS circles. So what do we want to do? Well, first thing to do is to go to View and view this object from the top. It's best to really work in top view here. But if you look at this finished object here, you can see the back of it. And the reason for that is we are currently in perspective mode. Perspective is where things disappear into the distance. And it's usually a good idea when working in FluidDesigner. I mean, it's up to you obviously, but it's usually a good idea to switch from perspective to ortho view. And that's what this does. It toggles from one to the other. So now you truly are looking right down on the object. You can't see the back of the object. So we're in top view and we're in ortho view. Now another thing that's quite a good idea to do is, I'll just shove down some of these panels slightly and just make it a little bit bigger. Another thing that's probably useful to do is you want to try and get the size and the shape of these exactly the same. And one way to do that is if we just scroll across the toolbar here, if we look at this icon here, the magnet, that's the snap feature. So if we click on the snap, and we also need to select increment. So increment means snap to increments of grid. Well, at the moment the grid is set up in centimeters. You can see here a unit, a square. Well, that square, the actual true life measurement of it is 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. Now if we switch on the snap and then we select one of these control points, when we try to move it, if we've got centimeters here, what will happen is it will jump in centimeters at a time. So snap is a good way of controlling the movement of these control points. And but what we need to do, if we want to create this eye shape, we really need to zoom in until it changes. You can see it changing there from centimeters. As we zoom in, and I'm just scrolling the center mouse button, changes to millimeters, and you can see it displays millimeters here as well. and that will enable us to control the movement of these control points accurately now. You can also see the value up here. So if you look at the X value, it's minus 15 at the moment. Well, the red arrow is the X dimension. So if I move this to the left just one space, you can see that goes to minus 16. Move it another space, minus 17. Move it another space, minus 18. So I've moved it 3 units, 3 millimeters to the left. And if I do the same with the one on the right, 1, 2, 3, what you'll see is that the position of the control point started off at minus 5. Now the minus 5 is the measurement from the middle of the object here. If you imagine back in the days when you did mathematics at school, this is the x-axis, this is the y-axis, the green, and so anything to the left is negative x. So we start off at minus 5, when we move 1 to the right we're now at minus 4, minus 3, minus 2, minus 1. We actually need to be at minus 2, sorry, because we moved this one 3 units. So what that does is it gives us a uniform shape. Now if you don't want a uniform shape, you don't need to switch on snap, and you don't need to look at these values or count the squares. That's entirely down to you. But if we now zoom in on this eye, if we do exactly the same thing there, you'll see this control point, it's not at minus, it's at plus 15. So here's the y-axis, this green line, and what it's saying is we're 15 millimeters to the right of that green line. So we want to move it 3 more millimeters, so it should end up at 18. So 1, 2, 3 at 18. And this one starts off at 5. Now we want to move it to the left, so we need to take 3 away. 1, 2, 3, that'll take us to 2. So there you can see that the eyes are now uniform. And we now need to make the mouth shape. Well, we can probably do this in big jumps. So I'm just moving it in centimeters now because I've got centimeter grid here, and that's probably centimeters is not going to be very good for moving this. Yeah, it looks really weird. Okay, so I need to zoom in millimeters now. Now I can change this. Can't quite remember what the other mouth looked like. Probably didn't look like that. No, the bottom needs to come down. I went the wrong direction there. Okay, so something like that. Okay, now the actual layout and style of this is entirely down to you. But one point to note about these objects is it's not a good idea to have them crossing over like that. This won't print. This will make a right mess of things. So as you're moving these objects around, you do need to make sure that they don't overlap each other. Otherwise you're going to have all sorts of problems. Similarly, you can't take this outside here. That's a strange area. It's not going to print. Okay, so you do need to be a little bit careful about that. Okay, so we've reshaped our happy face just by dragging control points. Now clearly you can change this face to whatever appearance that you want, and it doesn't have to be a face. You can write letters on these objects and other things. Okay, so now once we've actually done that and we've adjusted the control points, we are currently in edit mode. By default this object opens up in edit mode, so I can press the tab key on the keyboard, to come out of edit mode. And now what I need to do is, well, I've mentioned that this object, or these objects, are NURBS circles, and NURBS circles are curves. NURBS circles are curves. We can't print curves, we've got to change curves to meshes. Okay? But before we change this to a mesh, if we look in the properties panel here, the show the curve data information, this is a curve icon here, indicates that there are some properties that we can change about this object. We can extrude it, and we can change the bevel depth. Now one point to note when creating these pendants is that this value here at the top is 2D. Okay, so that does need to be set at 2D, not 3D, if you're going to create these sorts of objects. So what we want to do is to give it some thickness, and we can do that using Extrude. So if I click on here, you'll see what's happening. That's 1 millimeter, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm giving it some thickness. Now I've got Extrude. Let me just set Extrude at 5. If I click on this icon here, show the main information, this will give me the size of the object. And if we look at the Z dimension, the blue arrow, the blue direction is the Z dimension, red is X, green is Y, this is the Z dimension. You'll see the value is 10 millimeters. In other words, this is 10 millimeters thick. But if we go back to show the curve data information, we've got Extrude at 5. Now what that means is that when we set Extrude at 5, it's 5 up from the grid and 5 down from the grid when it extrudes, and therefore it's a total thickness of 10. Now in this lesson we want to set the Extrude at 3 millimeters, so it's 3 millimeters up, 3 millimeters down, which gives a total thickness of 6 millimeters. Now one other feature that we want to do here is, if I zoom in on this object, this is not sharp and square. This is what's called a beveled edge. And a beveled edge just takes the sharpness off the edge of the object. And we can add a bevel to this, well, by clicking bevel depth. Now if we do 1 or 2 millimeters, it's a bit dramatic. Normally what we would do is to type in a value here of about 0.2 mm, 0.2 millimeters. That just takes the sharpness of the edge of the object. Okay, so that's the bevel depth. So those are the two values we can enter in there. So this is now the same object, so what we need to do is to convert it from a curve to a mesh. So we go to Tools, Object Tools, and convert it to a mesh. And this will now change, and we can't change the curve data there anymore. There's no icon at the top. So there's our object, our happy face pendant. So we can highlight this one, and we can delete any object in FluidDesigner by pressing X on the keyboard and deleting it. And we can save this object, and we always recommend you use Save As. Go up through the menu system and go to My Projects, Jewellery Projects, and we're doing Pendants, and save that as 01 Happy Face Pendant as a Blender file. Now we can't print Blender files, and also because of the way Blender works, there are going to be some issues around the edges of this object. They're not going to be completely watertight and printable, so we must also go to Netfabb Basic to fix any problems. So what we need to do is to go to File and Export. Now the printable file format that we usually use is the Wavefront OBJ format, and I'm just going to save it to the desktop as Happy Face Pendant OBJ file. And then what you need to do is, on the internet you can find the free piece of software Netfabb Basic, and if you install Netfabb Basic and go to Project and Open, and go to the desktop and open Lesson 01 Happy Face Pendant. Now you can see we've got a warning red triangle here. Now that tells me there are some things wrong with this mesh. It's not printable. But not to worry, if we just go to Extras and repair the part, Netfabb will analyze this object, and I'll just move the window across because it doesn't quite fit in the video capture window. Netfabb will identify problems, and you can see yellow lines around here, and this is just how FluidDesigner works. It's not a perfect system for creating 3D printable objects, but with Netfabb we can repair things. So if we just click on Update here, you can see that there are 40 holes and 3,840 border edge problems, and there's quite a lot of shells. But if we click Automatic Repair and execute it, and click Update, you see all of these problems go away. The yellow lines disappear. Netfabb has repaired this object, so it's now in a printable file format. So if we apply the repair and remove the old part, all we need to do now is to go to Part and export it as a wavefront object, export it to the desktop, and Netfabb adds the text repaired to this, and this is the file that you could now send to the printer. Okay, so that's it. That's the end of today's lesson using NURBS Circles to create a pendant.